today's subject that we're going to talk about is controlling your workers' compensation costs. And I know this time of year, you're all coming up on time to renew your workers' compensation premium. Your premium year is just about to come up. And some of you out there have got a pleasant surprise in that your EMOD, and let's hope it's not a surprise, you know it's coming because you're working that way, your EMOD's gone down. But some of you get the other side of that, where an EMOD's gone up and it may impact your premiums and cost more to your budget based on your workers' compensation performance. And that's really what we wanted to talk about today, is how do we really take control of that and be able to bring those costs down, at the same time keeping our people healthy or getting them healthy when they do become injured as quickly as we can, and getting them back to being productive members of our team as soon as we can. So our goal really is to help you reduce your injuries, keep workers healthy, and ultimately save money. We think all of those are things that can go together. We can do all of those things at the same time if we go into it intentionally and look at the program and really manage it that direction. Okay, just a couple of basic things about workers' compensation. It is government mandated insurance coverage. If you're an employer, you have to have workers' compensation coverage, with a few exceptions out there. But in general, if we have employees, we have to have this coverage, and that's a good thing. This workers' compensation developed over really a century to the point that it is now, from a few companies providing this coverage to now where it's mandated as coverage by the government. It's a good thing because it works for both the employer and the employee. The employer pays for medical care, sometimes for life, for injured employees, pay for lost wages, other indemnity costs, things that go along with that. The employee needs to cooperate. They have to cooperate, and they can't really sue under the workers' compensation program. It is a statutory program, and it says this is how it's going to happen. Now, one thing that is pretty standard throughout all of this is this program always leans toward the injured employee. That's why we don't have a lot of lawyers involved here. Is really, it provides the best care for that employee, but it's statutory. This is how it works, and it doesn't matter who your carrier is. We're glad you're with the trust, but if you're with somebody else, it's not going to change how a claim will be processed, because it's a statutory thing. All right, let's keep going here. Who is covered under workers' compensation? And the answer is it's employees. Employees work in the course and scope of their work, their employment. We ask a question, what about volunteers in local government agencies? We have a lot of volunteers, anywhere from volunteer firefighters to people that are working at the animal shelter to doing a lot of different things. Well, in the state of Utah, once again, this is a statutory thing. Those volunteers are tantamount to employees. They have basically the same coverage with some limited exceptions. So some of those volunteers, well, let's talk about public safety volunteers. They have the same coverage as an employee, meaning medical benefits as well as lost wages if they miss time off at work. But there are other employees that aren't public safety related. So when I say public safety, if you're in law enforcement, fire, EMS, search and rescue, all of those volunteers in that area have all of those benefits. If you're another volunteer, you're working outside of public safety, then your medical benefits will be covered, but not the lost wages. Okay, here we go. So work comp benefits, medical care, So hospitalization, doctor visits, prescriptions, mileage, all of those things. And there are also other things. Indemnity means when we lose time off or other things that have to be replaced because of the injuries that have taken place there. There are different types of disability that we see. Temporary total, that's time off of work. Temporary partial, that would be when I have an injury that causes me to be on restrictions, and so I can't do all of my job. I'm restricted from a certain portion of that job. And there are some that are permanent. There are some that are temporary. All right. And then there's lost time claims, or these indemnity claims that we talk about. If I'm taken off of work for an injury that's sustained in the course and scope of my duties as at work, I get paid for the lost wages that I have. Now, it's a reduced amount. It's 66 2/3% of my normal wage there. However, it is tax-free. Sometimes we see where our members are trying to make up the difference in that 66 2/3, and they will pay the employee more or do something to allow that employee to take some other benefits to make that up. Well, in reality, that 66 2/3% that they're getting is tax-free. And so really they're taking home basically the same amount of money as they would be otherwise, because those taxes are not taken out of there. So we don't encourage people to make up the difference in that. That number is there because it is tax-free income. Okay. All right, Mike, I see something in the chat. Was that just you posting that up?
Yeah, that was just me posting up the form.
Great, thank you. So let's talk about the anatomy of work comp premium. What goes into your premium? What determines how much you pay for a workers' compensation premium? Well, number one is your payroll. That's a major part of this. And so as our guys go out and they talk to you about your renewals, or you get your renewal in the mail, you do it through our MyTrust application, it's going to ask about payroll, and payroll in various different classes. There are different types of risk associated with different types of work. Obviously, somebody who is working out in a street would probably have a higher risk than somebody who's working in an office, or a police officer would have a higher risk than somebody doing another type of a job. And so your employees and the payroll associated with them are an important part of calculating this, because we need to know what type of risk they are to the organization. So class codes, and this is through the NCCI, which is basically a national ratings bureau that makes these classifications, and they have standard codes for that. And those are things, like I said, this is really more of a statutory thing with workers' compensation. And so we follow those codes. There's also this thing called the EMOD, or the experience modification factor. And there are a few different words that some call it an XMOD, but we use the term EMOD, experience modification factor. And that is tantamount to a credit score for your organization. It's how well you've done in workers' compensation. How do you compare to other organizations with similar risks, similar type of work that you're doing? So just the basics of an EMOD. If your EMOD is 1, you're average. That means you are the same as the average person in your type of industry. If your EMOD is greater than 1, you're going to be paying a surcharge, because you are having more losses than the average. If your EMOD is less than 1, then you will be getting a discount, because your losses are less than the average of the industry. Okay, we'll talk about that more in just a second. And there's also some other things that go into that, things such as schedule rating, and that's just the ability, some flexibility that that we have in our operation to be able to look at you and say, you know what, they had one really bad loss, but they're a good partner. They've got great things in place, and so that just gives a little bit of leeway in there to work on your premium and balance that out. Okay, here we go. The next one, an EMOD. Your EMOD, I gave you a little bit of an overview, but how is it calculated? Well, it takes into account the first 3 of the last 4 years. So last year, any accidents, any claims that you had, they haven't totally matured by this time. And so we don't know really what the costs are going to be associated with those. And so when I say we, this is the trust, but really any work comp insurer out there is going to use this same formula. We will take those first 3 years. Those claims have matured by this point, and we know what the costs were. And they go into a calculation, a super secret calculation that that takes the losses and the types of losses that you have had and compares that to the average of the industry. And so that's where your class codes come in, why those are important. We generate a number from that calculation that gives your expected losses. So the dollar amount that we expect you to lose during a given year. Okay, if you go above those expected losses, then your EMOD is going to be higher than 1. If you go below that, then your EMOD will be less than 1, and obviously that'll have an impact on your premium. There are certain caps. If there's a giant claim, you're not going to be responsible for all of that. There will be a cap to that. Occasionally, there will be $1 million workers' compensation claim or $500,000. All of that doesn't count against you. There's a cap to that. Okay. Certain types of losses have a greater weighting than others. So let's talk about that. Let's say I have 2 individual injuries to employees. They're hurt, and let's say each of those claims cost $10,000. But one of those claims has time off of work. One of the employees missed a week of work, and the other one didn't. For whatever reason, their claim cost a whole bunch of money. Maybe they had some diagnostic things that, multiple MRIs or something like that cost a lot of money. So it cost $10,000 just for the medical part of that, no lost time. Well, that employee, their cost, the amount that would be counted towards your EMOD is discounted by 70%. Only 30% of that $10,000, $3,000 would count towards your EMOD. Well, obviously, you can see this is weighted a lot heavier towards lost time or indemnity claims. 100% of those losses go towards your EMOD calculation. Okay, and like we said, it's capped. And so if you have those massive claims, $500,000 is not going to count against you. It's up to $140,000. All right. And there are certain types of losses, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but we have primary and excess losses. So there are certain losses that are in excess of a certain level. They have a big impact on your EMOD. We're going to talk about how we go about handling these. So let's talk workers' compensation best practices. Mike, I didn't see, do we have any questions on that part of it so far?
Nope.
Okay. Great. So workers' compensation best practices. Here are some things that you can do to control. I made a goal today. I'm going to do this quicker to help control the cost of your workers' compensation. Number 1, the best way to control workers' compensation cost is to It's to prevent the accident from ever happening to start with. And we spend a lot of time talking about doing that. Preventing these accidents is really the way that we prevent all of the problems that go along. Not having people to do the job, or they're injured and so they have less capability of doing the job, or they're totally out of work and we have to backfill for them. Sometimes we may never get that employee back to work because they're injured bad enough that they can't do that type of work again. So number one, best way to control your workers' compensation costs is to have a good safety program, to have a designated safety officer, to have a safety committee, to do your training and do all those things that we talk about every other webinar that we're presenting out here. Let's prevent that from happening to start with. But sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes people get injured. So what do we do there to control our costs? Well, number one is appoint a workers' compensation coordinator, somebody that really owns the program. Many times this is somebody in human resources, but it doesn't have to be. But there should be somebody that owns this process. How do we deal with a workers' compensation claim? Who calls and reports the claim? How do we follow up and make sure things are going well? What are the responsibilities of the workers' compensation coordinator? Well, really understand the process, help that injured employee through the process to make sure that we get them the information that they need, to make sure they get to their doctor appointments, to make sure that they understand the process that they're going through, and ultimately that we get them back to work as soon as we can, and get them healthy as soon as we can. Their job is to help answer questions, to provide information of who to talk to with adjusters. This is really to be that person at your organization that is there to help this process move forward. To care for the person and help them heal, show them, real legitimate care. Hey, we're sorry that you're injured at work, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything to get you healthy, because we want you back to 100%, for not just for work, but for you in your life. And the other thing is coordinate return to work, coordinate the program to get this person back. And we'll talk about just how critical that is. All right. Mike just did a presentation on first aid. And I think that's a critical thing, that we have staff wherever we're working that have first aid skills. And so we can provide aid if somebody becomes injured. Now, if it's a 911 call, we call 911. And we get, if it's a life-threatening injury, we get that. When we get them to seek that care. But for a lot of these things, it may be a first aid. And if we've got people there that can provide first aid, well, that can help out. If the employee doesn't need to go to the doctor because we put a Band-Aid on, well, that's going to save you money in the long run. Even though there may not be a lot of cost to take an employee to a doctor and have the doctor put the Band-Aid on, there's still cost that goes along with that, and that still counts against your EMOD. So if we can prevent that, then that's a good thing to do. Whenever an injury occurs, one of those first notifications needs to be to the workers' compensation coordinator, so they can take the appropriate steps that they need to, and just be notified so they can be aware of the steps that need to be taken after the medical care is given. Take the injured employee to the clinic. Don't allow somebody who's injured to drive themselves to the clinic for a number of reasons. One, they might look down and see the blood that's soaking through the Band-Aid and pass out and get injured more in a car crash. But two, we need to be there to support them, to ensure they get to the appropriate clinic and that they get the care that they need. So have a supervisor or the work comp coordinator. Generally, the supervisor is the best to do this, but take them to the clinic. Have a packet there that has information for them to help them through the process, and to also help our supervisors through the process. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. I just realized I jumbled my slides, and that was supposed to be next. Injury reporting. Report all injuries no matter what. So, I'm out. I did something over the weekend. I don't know what I was doing, but I feel like I did about 1,000 crunches. My abs are a little sore today. So I'm reporting my injury now. Well, that's not something that I'm looking to go to the doctor about. It wasn't even a work-related thing, but let's say it was. Well, I'm going to make a report on that. Why? It preserves my ability to, if something changes down the road, hey, my abs are, I must have torn something. I need to go to a doctor um, and seek some care for that. I've made my notification. That doesn't need to be a claim. There are a lot of times when, hey, I was out there working and my back's a little bit sore today. I really don't think I need to go to the doctor, but I just want to make sure it's reported. That should be our process. Track those things, write them down, have the person that's injured fill out a form, so you've got the notification that it has happened. And the timing on this, the employee needs to make an immediate notification to their supervisor. If they're injured on the job, that needs to be right now. They tell the supervisor what happened, and then the supervisor will take appropriate action. That supervisor from that point needs to make sure that information gets to the workers' compensation coordinator the same day. So if it happens today, the workers' compensation coordinator needs to know today that that's happened. That's a critical thing. Why is that? Well, it's because time equals money when it comes to these situations. The sooner we can get this injured person the care they need, even if that's just first aid, the better outcome we're going to have. Do I report $0 claims? We have an additional system there if you want to track those things that don't go to a doctor, where somebody's has a first aid injury and we want to track those. We have a system that you can track those as well. It's called an occurrence. And those can be changed over to a claim at any time. You just push a button on that. If you're interested in using that system, let Mike or myself know, and we can run you through doing that. But in general, I don't want to report everything as a claim if there's no cost that goes along with that, just because there's cost associated with managing a claim. So if I put a Band-Aid on somebody and we don't want to put that into the claim system, because if we start a claim, there is a certain amount of cost that goes along with it, although it may be minimal. Okay, always pay attention for fraud. If something doesn't seem to add up, well, just mention that. If I've got a claim that happens, you can mention that as you report the claim. I think there's a red flag around this one. It doesn't seem like this really happened the way it was. Now, that doesn't mean we're going out and accusing our coworkers, our staff with fraud, but occasionally it happens. And as a matter of fact, it's a pretty big cause of loss in the insurance fraud world. And so pay attention to those things. And if it doesn't seem right, definitely make a notification to the adjuster. Okay. All right. This injury packet that I was supposed to talk about before we went to that one it's great to have something that will help the employee and the supervisor through this process. And so our recommendation, and I will send out all of these documents with, well, not the job description, because that's one that you're responsible for putting together, but I will send out all the documents that we have to help you through this process. Have an injury packet available for that employee that's injured. Has the first report of injury. This is the form that they fill out. The supervisor should fill out an incident investigation form. What is their investigation? What is their angle on what happened there? They may have some details that the employee that was injured doesn't have. They may know some things about the type of work that will be beneficial to our overall investigation. So have those two documents there in the packet. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to fill all these out before we get medical care. If they're injured, we get them to medical care. But while the supervisor's there waiting for the employee to get patched up, that's a great time to start filling out these documents. A physician request for return to work, that's a nice document to have. And we like to have these go out to your providers ahead of this, but it can work then. Just basically letting the doctor know that we have a return to work program. We want to get this employee back to work as soon as they possibly can, and we will accommodate restrictions. And then a copy of this employee's job description. That will help the provider, the doctor, the nurse, whoever it is that's providing the care, to take a look at their job duties and say, can this person reasonably be able to do the job that they have? If they're able to do that job, well, they're not going to lose time, and that's going to help the employee, because they're able to stay at work and stay productive. It's also going to help us, because we don't have lost time claims that hit our EMODs and cause us cost. All right, directing care. This is an important one. In the state of Utah, say hallelujah that we live in Utah, because we're able to direct care. That first visit, we can direct where that injured employee goes. Now, sometimes if it's a 911 claim and the ambulance takes them, we don't have a whole lot of control over it. They're going to go to whatever hospital or emergency department where they go. But in most cases, though, we have the ability to direct where this employee sees care first. And that is something that can really have long-term impacts on the cost and the outcome of this claim. And why do I say that? Well, there are providers and there are providers. Some doctors know industrial injuries, and they know the system that goes around this. They know what return to work is. They know how to formulate restrictions, and they know how to read a job description. Other providers may not. Sometimes a primary care provider, they're just basically in it for giving the care, and they don't understand the other side of this, that this is a work-related injury. There have been doctors out there that will say, how much time do you think you need off? Well, that's gonna have a profound impact on our EMOD. So if we can have a provider ahead of time, or a clinic that we're working with that we've had a discussion with, and say, hey, we are planning on sending any work-related injuries here. We have an aggressive return to work program. We will accommodate whatever restrictions that you give to our injured employees, but we want to get them back to work as soon as we can. That's going to go a long way to controlling your EMOD in the long run. So know who your providers are. Now, some of you are in very rural parts of the state, and there may not be an industrial clinic where you are. There may not be a focus on that. You might only have a primary care provider in your community. Well, there are some options that are out there for those of you in the really rural areas. IHC is rolling out a program now where they will do online evaluations for industrial type cases through their WorkMed program. So that's one option for those of you that are out there. Another important thing, though, is making sure that you're in the network. Most of you out there have dealt with health insurance enough to know that I need to be in network, and it's no difference with workers' compensation. There are negotiated contracts and costs and all of that, and so if you're in network, it will be cheaper, and it's going to help your EMOD in the long run, because those costs will be less. Now there's a website there that you can go in and see who's in the network. And if you don't want to take the time to do that, give us a call, or take a look at your industrial clinics in the area, or the clinics you're using, and send us an email and say, hey, are these guys network providers? How's best to work with them? Okay. Post-injury treatment. After somebody's injured, there are some important steps. Your doctor, and this is another reason to use your clinic, is so you get this paperwork back. there should be some paperwork that goes with the supervisor back to the workers' compensation coordinator. And it will have some restrictions there, maybe. If they're appropriate, it will have restrictions. It'll definitely say what care should be done for this worker after they've been injured. Now, it might say, keep the wound clean and dry, or some of those standard things that we see. Come back in a week and get your stitches out. Or there may be specific restrictions: one-handed work only, sitting only, different types of restrictions like that. I have on here HIPAA. Now, we have to be careful with information like that, but as the employer, we do have the right to have this information back. Now, we want to protect that. This information should go to the workers' compensation coordinator. And once again, that's what I said. Most of the time, that workers' comp coordinator, it works in human resources. They work with this type of information on a regular basis, and they keep it confidential. All right. We want to reassure the injured worker. Hey, we're sorry you're injured, but we're going to do everything we can to get you healthy and get you back to work as soon as we can. We're going to take care of you. Then we want to get together and create a plan. What will be the next steps that we're going to do to work together to get this person better and get them back to work and back to being productive as soon as possible. And so that leads us to the return to work program. Our recommendation at the Trust is that each of your organizations have a return to work program. And I have a simple one-page boilerplate program that you can put your organization's name and the name of your workers' compensation coordinator and their phone number, and I think email it asks, and adopt it. And then you've got a program. And many of you out there have already adopted this. If you have your own program, that's fine. There's no problem there, but there are a few things that are important in this program to have there. So return to work program basically says that we're going to get our employee back as soon as possible. That is our goal, is to get them back to productivity as soon as possible, at the same time keeping them healthy. If somebody needs to be off work, we'll accommodate that. We definitely would go with that, and we will accommodate restrictions. Our goal is not to hurt an employee. Our goal is to help them be productive and live within their restrictions to be able to do their job. Okay. So here's what I kind of roughly said there. Return injured employee to work as soon as medically reasonable, even if they have restrictions. Okay. Now, I just want to clarify one thing. This is for workers' compensation only. Occasionally, I'll get people say, well, this person is injured. Do I have to take this person back to work? And then it comes out that this was a totally non-work related injury. They were doing something on the weekend and they hurt their back. This is only for work-related injuries, only for workers' compensation. It's up to you to handle or to decide how you're going to handle non-work-related injuries. However, we do recommend that you have a comprehensive absence and leave policy to help with both of these things. But when we talk about getting people back to work, we're talking about workers' compensation claims, workers' compensation injuries. Why do we want to get them back to work? Well, productivity. They have skills that we hired them for a reason. And so we want to get those skills back in production. They also want to be able to do their job as well, because they want to be productive. They want to be a part of the team, and they want to be able to ensure that they can continue to support their family and get paid and all of those things. Employee retention. If we have somebody injured, we run the risk of losing those skills. It has been proven over and over again that people who are at work heal faster than those who are not at work. They're more motivated to heal and do the things that they need because they feel they're a part of the team. And at the end of the day, if we do all of these things, it saves us money and helps us control our premium. All right. There are a lot of costs that goes into this, and I'm not here to necessarily sell you on this, but I'd love to have that discussion with you if you have concerns about this. But why do we want to get an employee back to work? Well, if somebody's off, who does their job? What does it cost us in productivity? Do I have to retrain people? Do I have to pay people overtime to get them to do their job? Are they able, is anybody even able to do the things that this person is? Sometimes there's a critical member of our team and we just don't have anybody that's able to do that. So there are a lot of reasons why we want to get these people back to work. And here are a couple of statistics. Only 5 to 10% of injured workers need more than 1 to 2 days off after an injury. 24% of them are off more than 1 to 2 days if they are off work. And 60 to 80% of injuries involve unnecessary time off. Well, this is paid for through workers' compensation, but guess what? At the end of the day, it impacts your EMOD, and you're going to be paying for this for the next 3 years. EMOD has a long memory, and so it's going to hit your premium for multiple years. And so we win with return to work, and everybody wins, right? We keep that employee productive. We don't put them in a situation where they're going to injure themselves. We're going to accommodate their restriction, but we get them back to productivity as soon as we can. And at the end of the day, our EMOD and our cost benefit and the employee benefits as well, being back to work. Okay, so here's the boilerplate. I will send that out to everybody who signed up for the webinar today. It's a simple boilerplate, 1 page. Put your name in there. You can see those X's in there for phone numbers, and you put your the worker comp coordinator and the name of your organization in there, and adopt it and live by it, and it's going to help you. All right. So in this policy, it basically says we are committed to provide a safe work environment to our employees, but if an employee becomes injured on the job, we will do everything we can to help the employee heal and return to work as quickly as possible. When employees are able to work and be a contributing team member, the injured employee heals faster, we are more productive, and the morale of our entire organization is lifted. This is right out of the policy, out of the boilerplate. And that's what we're really committing to. We're going to do what we can. And this is one of those slides that I got out of order. Wow. Okay. So in creating our plan to get this person back to work, we want to involve all parties: the supervisor, human resources, the workers' compensation coordinator, the employee that's injured. And so we can look and say, how are we really doing when it comes to the job duties? What is their normal job? Is there some transitional duty that we can do? They have restrictions, or maybe they had to have surgery and they took some time, they had to take some time off of work. How do we get them back to work? What's the best transitional duty plan to have them back to work? And then we want to monitor their restriction compliance. The employee has an obligation, if they have restrictions, that they follow those restrictions. And if we find out that they're not doing that, well, that's not good, because it may lengthen the amount of time that it takes for them to heal. It could even cause more significant injury. So definitely we want to talk with that employee. If they refuse and they say, I'm doing my job 100% the way I am, I'm not doing those restrictions, well, then we ought to have a discussion about discipline, because that's a real critical part of their overall healing, is to follow the restrictions given by the doctor. Okay. We should be documenting milestones. Document what happens. Now, our adjusters are going to do a really good job of this, but for your own benefit, it's important that you track what happens in these claims. It will allow you to help the employee along and help this claim mature and get done. So really document what happens there. All right. Restricted duty commitment, same thing goes with this. We are committing that we're going to figure out a way to get this person back to work. We are going to follow up with the employer. Let them know that we care about them. Let them know that we're paying attention to their claim and what they're doing. We want to make sure that they're attending their doctor appointments. That's a critical part of getting them healthy. If they don't make it to the doctor appointments, it's hard to move them along and help them get better. And so the work comp coordinator should really have their ear to the ground on this, and maybe do a follow-up. Hey, how'd things go with the doctor? Any change in your restrictions, anything like that? Okay. All right. Just a word of caution. Don't fire an employee that's off work on workers' compensation. Now, there are certain situations where that may have to happen. The problem with that is we lose control over the direction, the trajectory of that claim. Getting somebody back to work once we've terminated them is really impossible. Even in situations where I have seasonal workers that finish up the end of the season where they would normally end their job, don't process termination on that person if they're off work, or if they've got an ongoing workers' compensation claim. If we're able to get some restrictions back from their doctor that says, hey, they can do this, well, then we can contact the employee and say, hey, let's work on getting you back. If they say, well, hey, I've gone back to school, well, then we can have discussions with the adjuster on that, and there's potential that we can end benefits. But if we just terminate the employee, we lose a lot of control over how that claim processes and how it matures. Okay. Anytime I'm going to do any sort of disciplinary action or termination, make sure that you're using your legal counsel, that they're involved with this, and always consult with the claims adjuster prior to taking adverse employment action. We're going to terminate somebody. Make sure you've had that discussion with the adjuster ahead of time. Our adjusters work really hard. They're going to be pretty direct in communications there. Just take that as their professionalism. They're really busy and they have a lot of things going on, but they're going to do the things that they can to help you move this forward. They're going to help you to get the person back to work and help you get them healthy. So make sure you use them. If you have any questions on this, definitely you can talk to Mike or myself, or especially talk to Jeff Rowley here, our claims manager at the trust. All right, whole list of documents that I will be sending out to everybody that signed up here. Please take a look, use them, make them yours, add your name and adopt those. And that's really how I think we get better. So that's really the presentation for the day. If anybody has questions, please type those into the chat box. I'd be happy to answer those now. I know I threw a lot of material at you quickly, and some of it may be just old hat, but some of you out there may be new to this, and you may have questions, and that's really what Mike and myself are for. And our job is to help you through this process, help you be the best that you can be when it comes to managing claims, getting people back to work, and more importantly, having that safety program that's going to prevent those injuries to start with. So, Mike, what do we got? Anything?
We don't have anything. I mean, this is a big, hairy subject. You did a great job with this. So.
You must have fallen asleep. I assumed we'd have quite a few questions. So, and I understand sometimes those questions may be complicated, or you want to ask us directly, and we're definitely open to those phone calls or emails or questions that you may have. We'd love to chat with you about that. So definitely reach out to us. Reach out to Jeff Rowley and the claims adjusters. That's our job, is to help you through the process and make it as easy as possible for everybody concerned. So,
yep.
I don't see any more. Mike, anything you want to add?
No, I think this stuff is super, super important, especially this last part that you went over about the return to work program and getting our folks back to work. Just there's always something to do, right? There's always papers to be filed, or a project that needs to be completed, or a storeroom that needs to be reorganized, or whatever it is, right? I can't tell you the job that does for an employee's psyche too. Like somebody who's been hurt and injured on a job, and you're now as their employer, you're not blackballing this person and saying, we don't want you here because you're a liability. no, come back. We've got stuff for you. Come back and work for us. Come back and keep doing a good job for us. I mean, that works wonders for an employee and how they feel about themselves after an accident occurs.
For sure. Awesome. And a lot of times people are like, well, you just don't really have anything for this person to do. Well, I'm not in your shoes, but I guarantee you there's plenty of stuff that needs to be done for, if we're looking at restricted duty jobs, there are books to be shelved at the library. There's paperwork that needs to be done. There are SDS sheets that need to be updated and policies and
Mhm.
many different jobs. And I'll send this out, ideas for light duty jobs, things that you can consider when you look at those. So, all right, folks, thank you so much for your attendance today. Appreciate all of your efforts out there. Go out and have a safe day.